Back in 2021, it was more than a little surreal to see Metroid return so glamorously. For so long, Metroid had been probably the most infamous among Nintendo franchise sub-stories. Yet, in 2021, it came crashing through the fucking window with a Game of the Year nomination and a lot of reaction videos. Since 2D Zelda is in Remake Purgatory and Nintendo's other 2D series are all good, but they're all also really formulaic, that puts 2D Metroid on a higher level than any other 2D Nintendo franchise. Or at least any other 2D Nintendo franchise that's campaign-based, because, Smash Bros., Mario Maker, yada yada. Naturally, with all the success, a sequel to Metroid Dread would make a lot of sense. We're all hoping for one, but just in case, I spent a shit ton of time writing my own pitch for one. One which I will now share with the world, with the hope of getting a shit ton of internet views. Also, speaking of internet views, I don't like to be the guy who brings up YouTube statistics to get you to subscribe, but come on, 5%? 5% of my viewers are subscribed. You can do better than that. You can do better than that. Also, just to clarify what kind of sequel I'll be writing, this is a direct follow-up to Dread's story, not just a self-contained adventure that takes place after Dread like some people are saying a Dread sequel is going to be. I, personally, have a vast preference for ongoing epics over self-contained individual stories within the universe. Sakamoto said that the arc with the Metroids is over, and I will be respecting that. Metroids won't appear in this game, and Samus's Metroid DNA will have minimal story significance outside of pure gameplay. However, while Metroids won't be important, I will be using several other plot elements from Dread and other previous games. During the ending of Metroid Dread, a lot of shit happened. And it makes sense, you gotta go out with a bang. But there were two unexplained elements in what happened in Metroid Dread's ending that I'll be building off of in the sequel. The first one is obvious, you all guessed it, it's the missing Hanubia ships. In Metroid Dread, there were two ships docked in Hanubia, but when you go by that area later while escaping the planet, those ships are missing, presumably flown away by X-Parasites. Now, a lot of people figured this would be important in the Dread sequel, so it's probably pretty obvious that I'm going to be using this. However, I won't be going in the same direction you think with that plot element. That will be made evident by the second plot element I'm taking from Metroid Dread's ending, Quiet Robe X's sacrifice. Now, there's been a lot of debate going on to whether or not Quiet Robe X's actions at the end of Metroid Dread were simply because of him trying to remove Samus's Metroid DNA, or if that was actually Quiet Robe regaining control of the X-Parasite. Or maybe the X-Parasite decided to be good because of Quiet Robe's memories. There's a lot of possibilities. For the sake of the story direction that I want to take this pitch, we'll be using the possibility that Quiet Robe regained control of his body, probably via bird magic. You don't have to agree with my views on the lore, but I think a good story could be made out of this interpretation specifically, so I'm going to use it. Don't start a lore argument in the comments if you think this interpretation is dumb, please. Anyways, it's time to finally begin. On to the opening cutscene! Planet ZDR. T-minus 4 minutes before planetary explosion. Idarash has just crashed into Hanubia, and both Metroid Suit Samus and Ravenbeak are getting up from the wreckage. The camera pans over to a ledge overlooking the crash site, where an elite Mach-N ex-soldier watches from a distance. Seeing Metroid Suit Samus, its X-Parasite instincts tell it to run, so it runs. The elite Mach-N ex-soldier, who I'll now be naming because that's a mouthful, Goldenclaw. His name is Goldenclaw. Goldenclaw heads over to the two ships in Hanubia we saw go missing, and then splits into two. The first Goldenclaw goes into a ship, tries to fly it away, and crashes into the side of a building. The second prepares to do the same, but then it stops itself. Or rather, the Chozo stops the X-Parasite. Goldenclaw has just come to a realization. X-Parasites may be able to absorb the knowledge and memories of their hosts, but the higher brain functions of an X-Parasite has limits even then. Limits that stop them from, say, flying ships? Now, I know that making it so that X can't fly ships is a dumb fucking retcon. I know. But I figured there's no good reason why they wouldn't have flown off of ZDR using those ships ages ago, or have found a ship lying around the BSL and have left from there. So, since I was going to have these ships get used in this game, I figured I should come up with an explanation for why they hadn't flown them away before. The other option was to make it so that the X-Parasites didn't actually care about taking over more worlds, but I have a few issues with that one. Future Editor Calvin, if you could show my issues on screen now, that would be great. Thank you. At the end of the day, though, this dumb fucking retcon doesn't matter too much for Metroid as a whole. Once again, I decided to use this explanation in particular because it works best with this story in particular. So, Golden Claw stops the X-Parasite that infected him from taking off. There's a whole Doc, you listen to me now moment. And eventually, the X-Parasite caves and gives Golden Claw control of the body, because if it doesn't let Golden Claw drive, then both of their species are going to be brought to extinction by the dreaded hunter. Once Golden Claw gains control, he doesn't take off immediately. Instead, he punches in a few commands onto the ship's console, and a notification comes up on the ship's screen. The subtitles translate this notification from Chozo language into English, which says, Neural data downloading. Suddenly, lights start flashing red inside the ship, and another notification comes up saying that the planetary self-destruct sequence has just been activated. Golden Claw seems distraught and urges the download to hurry up, and thankfully for him, it finishes fairly quickly. Afterwards, Golden Claw utters the famous Mockin mantra. And then after, he starts up the ship and launches out of the planet's atmosphere. Golden Claw punches a few coordinates into the console, and we're given the name of the planet that he intends to go to from here. The subtitles translate it as Space Pirate Homeworld. Yes, that Space Pirate Homeworld. The one from Prime 3. After that cutscene, the game cues in the usual Metroid intro recap, where Samus recants the events leading up to this game. She mentions the Chozo, the Metroids, the X, and even the Space Pirates. At the end, she brings up a distress signal she received from a commercial starship orbiting the Space Pirate homeworld. She's worried this could mean the return of the Space Pirates, and she's off to investigate. Cue the start of Metroid 6, or its proper name, I named it, Power is Metroid. Okay, now we'll progress through the game's story and design in a bit, but first I'd like to talk about this game's mechanics. A lot of the mechanics would be the same as Dread, since Dread was great mechanically, but we'd have to add quite a few more new mechanics and some changes to older mechanics in order to make this game not feel like $60 DLC for Dread. Also, while Dread's mechanics are great for the most part, there are a few things I'd like to change. First new mechanic. I've seen the idea of a Metroid Suit Hyper Mode thrown around quite a lot, and frankly, I quite like the idea. Now, of course, Sakamoto said the Metroids were done in story terms, meaning this mechanic would have to have minimal story involvement. Even without much story significance, however, I think it'd be a cool little thing gameplay-wise. However, the other Metroid game to have Hyper Mode, Metroid Prime 3, was fairly unbalanced in how Hyper Mode worked. So, the Hyper Mode in this game would have to work pretty differently. I'm thinking we should make it time-based instead of being tied in with your health. You have to wait a certain amount of time to charge it, and then afterwards you keep it for a certain amount of time before it goes away, and you'll have to wait for it to recharge again. While Hyper Mode is active, Samus' arm cannon will start shooting short bursts of Hyper Beam blasts, because full streams like in Dread would be way too OP. The melee counter will be replaced with the Metroid Drain ability, and whichever suit Samus is wearing will be replaced by the Metroid suit. Boss counter animations will have an alternative version if you use the Drain ability while in Hyper Mode instead of parrying normally. Other mechanics. Adam will now be able to communicate with Samus remotely instead of having to use nav rooms, but he'll do so very scarcely, because isolation is important. Scan Visor. Honestly, this needs to move over to 2D. I understand them not putting it in Dread, but we gotta have it here, man. Come on. Give us the 2D Scan Visor. We need it. The Scan Visor is so good. I also feel like Samus needs a new set of upgrades. She's been using the same Chozo set in all 5 mainline Metroid games, with a few extras usually, and each of the 2D Metroid games have had a decent excuse for that. But here, I think it's time for Samus to get unique new beams and suits. Also, since we're using new beams, they'll have to have unique attributes instead of the simple buffs the usual 2D beams give, like, I let you shoot through walls, and I give you a wider radius. So, because they need to have the unique attributes, we'll be replacing beam stacking with swapping between beams, like in Prime 1 and Prime 2. Is it just me, or am I taking a lot of elements from the Prime series? Well, this was mostly unintentional. I actually prefer the 2D series. But I think a Prime-style 2D game does have some potential, so let's go for it. Super Missiles. I hate how they stack onto regular missiles in Fusion and Dread. Since most enemies scale up their health to match the Super Missile damage a while after you get the Super Missiles, and since there's a lot more interesting missile upgrades you get after the Super Missiles that also stack onto regular missiles, it makes it really easy to forget you ever got Super Missiles to begin with. So, just bring back normal missile tanks and Super Missile tanks as separate, use minus to toggle between them, and activate your missile launcher with R. Boom, done. Final smaller change, I think we should make Samus's running speed slightly slower, but then make it so that pressing down the left stick acts as a run button, even without having a speed booster. We haven't had a run button since Super, so I think this would be nice. Now that we've discussed the mechanics, I'd also like to discuss this game's design fundamentals. Obviously, it's a Metroidvania, but I'd like to talk about how it differs from Dread. For one, I think it's about time one of the 2D games implements some planet hopping at least once. Now, I know planet hopping has always been a mixed bag in the Metroid series. It allows the game's scope to be much wider both in story and environments, but it also causes the progression to feel much more segmented and less natural, and it makes each planet feel less fleshed out because the game has to flesh out multiple planets within its runtime. Most Metroid games have been better off without planet hopping because of those negative factors, but I feel like there's ways we can change the way planet hopping is done so that it works better with Metroid. Just because it hasn't been executed well before, doesn't mean it can't be executed well. In terms of how it affects environments, we'll be keeping it constrained to 2 planets, plus a 3rd planet exclusive to the final showdown. For how it works for progression, instead of the objective on each planet being, destroy Leviathan Seed, go next. The first part of this game will have your mission take place solely on the first planet, with the second planet being completely uninvolved. The second part of the game will have you stuck on the second planet, unable to get back to the first planet or any other planet, and then only the third part of the game will see them connected with you going between them. The progression is still segmented, but the time spent on each planet is woven much better into the story than just destroy each Leviathan Seed sequentially. Also, once you get near the end of the game, you'll be bouncing between the 2 planets frequently. To keep the section from relying on the gunship too much, there will be teleportals that take you from a part on one planet to a part on the other, and the ship will only have one location to dock on each planet. Because of this, planet hopping will feel less like planet hopping and more like taking an elevator to a new area. It won't be perfect, but I think this is a pretty good way to implement multiple planets into a single Metroid game. Now, one complaint I heard about Metroid Dread was that it was too linear. And it was that it felt like the design was constantly railroading you in the right direction. Now, naturally, I prefer Metroid when it isn't linear. So I'd like to take a few liberties to make this feel extremely exploration heavy, even if the game's progression still takes you in one direction at the end of the day. We're not going full Breath of the Wild for Metroid, I don't think that's a good idea. Change for non-linearity number 1. Alternate paths. Add in a bit more interconnectivity between locations to make there be more viable ways to get where you want to go. There's usually a bit of this in Metroid, but I want more of it. Change for non-linearity number 2. Put optional stuff a bit more out of the way. Make it so you have to go through a couple rooms to get to the room with the upgrade puzzle. Change for non-linearity number 3. Less points of no return. Include points of no return when you need them, but only when you absolutely need them. Dread had quite a few unnecessary points of no return, and we'll be having none of that here. Change for non-linearity number 4. Good sequence breaking options. Preferably ones that you don't have to go super out of your way for just to get an early upgrade. Getting the grapple beam before Kraid in Dread was awesome, but by the time you're able to get the grapple beam early, you're right next to Kraid anyways, and the grapple beam is ages away, so it doesn't make a ton of sense to get the grapple beam first outside of the novelty. In this game, have the sequence breaks be much less out of the way. Change for non-linearity number 5. Optional suit upgrades. Not just expansions for health and missiles, full optional upgrades. Apart from upgrades that can be skipped via sequence breaks, upgrades that you don't have to get but the game shoves them in your face and really wants you to get, and the beam combos in the Prime games, optional upgrades haven't really been a thing since Super Metroid. I think optional upgrades are cool, and that is a crying shame that they haven't been here since Super. Bring them back, Nintendo. Bring back the optional upgrades. Change for non-linearity number 6. The big one. Multi-upgrade gates. Typically, the way Metroid progression works is there's a progression gate that needs an upgrade to pass through, and once you get the upgrade, you go back to that gate and pass through it. Sometimes this gate is a literal gate, otherwise it's more of an obstacle. Either way, it needs a certain upgrade to pass through. My idea here is required progression gates that need 2 upgrades you don't have yet in order to pass through. And these 2 upgrades you need could be collected in either order. You wouldn't need one to get the other. The way I see it, this is the closest Metroid can get to being open world without dividing the fanbase. I think an open world Metroid would probably be a bad idea, but the ability to get just, like, a couple upgrades in either order, that's minuscule, and it opens up exploration tremendously. Anyways, these are the 6 changes I'd make to make Power's Metroid less linear, while still keeping the Metroidvania format and not making it a full-on open-world Metroid game. Now that we're finally done with this, it's on to progressing through the actual game. Story and design. Samus lands on the commercial starship she received the distress signal from, and searches around a bit. There's a bit of tutorial stuff like climbing and shootable blocks, but not much. Then you encounter space pirates? That doesn't make any sense. They were supposed to have been wiped out. After defeating them, you're shown exactly how they're alive. X-parasites. These space pirates are infected by X-parasites. That's how they're back. The X must have ended up on the pirate homeworld somehow and infected their corpses. Also, Adam doesn't pop up to tell you this. It's the player's job to figure it out for themselves. If the player's not a seasoned Metroid fan, then Adam will discuss it a bit later, and hopefully the intro will have provided enough information for them to put 2 and 2 together for now. Also, the promotional material will have probably spoiled all this, since this story stuff is right at the beginning anyway. Once you get to the end of the ship, fighting through both infected zombie passengers and infected space pirates, you find a Mochan robot soldier? That's odd. First the space pirates, then the X, now the Mochan? What's going on here? Since you still have all your upgrades, the Chozo robot is fairly easy to defeat. Once you beat it though, instead of exploding instantly like it usually does when you beat it in Dread, it instead limps over to the control console and sets a crash course directly into the planet. The commercial spaceship will collide with Urtraghus in 1 minute and 30 seconds. Also, by the way, Urtraghus is meant to be the Space Pirate Homeworld's actual planet name, according to a few logs in Prime 3. And I'll be calling it that from now on because just Space Pirate Homeworld is not a very good name. Anyways, where were we? Oh right, the escape sequence. Yeah, we're now triggering a classic Metroid escape sequence, in which Samus has to get off the ship before it crashes into the planet. However, this escape sequence isn't like the usual Metroid escape sequence. This is because the commercial ship that Samus is currently on is big. It'd take a speedrunner 3 minutes to get out, a seasoned Metroid player on the first playthrough would take around 5 minutes to get out, and a newcomer to the series would take around 7. As I said before, this sequence gives you a minute 30 to escape. It lowballs the time on purpose because you were supposed to fail this sequence. You're supposed to run out of time. Meaning you also don't get a game over when you run out of time. The game continues on after the crash. Samus wakes up in the wreckage of the ship. She only has 10 energy left, and only 1 energy tank left, and all of her upgrades are gone except for the Morph Ball, in order to make up for it taking so long to get in Dread. Looking around, the ship seems to have crashed into some sort of Chozo temple. That's odd. Chozo robot, a Chozo temple, and X-parasites on Urtraghus, a space pirate planet. Adam contacts Samus and says he got the gunship off the commercial starship before it went down. A quick line in the dialogue will mention that they removed the function that requires the ship to be started manually before the autopilot kicks in, because if that function were still to be in place, then we wouldn't get to have a gunship in this game. Anyways, Adam discusses the presence of the Chozo and the X on this planet, and tells Samus to make her way back to the nearest docking bay on Urtraghus, so Adam and Samus can reconvene and figure out what the fuck is going on here. Adam quickly shares his current theory with Samus, that a Mochan infected by an X-parasite got off the EDR before it exploded, and ended up here. However, he doesn't have an explanation for why that X-infected Mochan would build a Chozo robot or a Chozo temple. They'll have to work it out once Samus gets back to the ship. From here, Samus will have to make her way out of the commercial ship's wreckage and the Chozo temple, and head over to Pirate Command, where there's a docking bay that Adam can land. After a bit of searching around and obtaining a few upgrades, Samus makes it over. Here's all the upgrades she gets along the way, in order. Adam tells Samus that he looked over the footage of what happened on CDR, and he found an anomaly. He tells her about the missing Hanubia ships, and how while further analysis shows that one of the ships crashed, the other one may have landed on Urtraghus. He then goes further, theorizing about a Mach-an ex-soldier possibly regaining control of their body like Quiet Robe did in the ship. This would be the Mach-an that we saw in the opening cutscene, who we know as Goldenclaw. Adam says that Goldenclaw could have gone to Urtraghus to possibly multiply into more X-Parasites that he would also have control over, and have the X-Parasites infect the dead pirates, so that Goldenclaw could raise an undead space pirate army. Adam says that, like with Ravenbeak, if they destroy the planet, then Goldenclaw would sense the danger and escape, and possibly try more immediate and drastic measures with their X-Parasite. This means Samus' only option here is to track down Goldenclaw, kill him, and absorb the X-Parasite. Then they can find a way to do the splody-splody on the planet. Now the stage is set, and Samus is officially on her mission. Is she getting paid? Probably not. The Federation is pretty shady, and if Samus told them about this to try to get them to pay her for this, then they might try to send out another Emmy robot to Urtraghus to procure an X sample and use it for federal misdeeds. So it looks like Samus will have no choice but to do this for free. It's all for the greater good, I guess. What kind of bounty hunter is Samus, caring about the greater good? Total whack job, no wonder she was raised by birds. Anyways, now that I'm done with that bit, Samus will have to alternate between two different areas during this part of the game. Pirate Command and Pirate Research. There, she'll find them kinda similar to their Prime 3 counterparts, but along with being in 2D, they'll also look like they spent a while falling into ruins, and then started being repaired with a new Chozo flare now. There's a lot of Space Pirate X-Parasites around these two areas to fight, along with the occasional Chozo robot soldier. Also, there's plenty of logs to scan, which lets you gain insight on what Goldenclaw's been up to, since it'll be a minute before he actually interacts with Samus, but I want him to have some presence in the game. Some of the logs will even mention how he actually survived the first X invasion, and was alive until Ravenbeak released the X from a loon, despite knowing that he was on the surface. Goldenclaw doesn't believe it was Ravenbeak, though. He's certain it was Samus who unleashed the X and doomed him, but part of him wonders... There's also other stuff detailing the history of the Chozo tribes. There's an explanation for why he landed on Urtraghus instead of infecting Federation space with the X. And an explanation for why he sent up a bunch of pirates in a ship piloted by a Chozo robot to take down that commercial ship. While Samus is wandering around these two areas, she will find these upgrades in this order. Some notable stuff here. The Virus Suit is reduced to its old function in Metroid 1 and Metroid 2, where it's an optional upgrade used to increase defense instead of a mandatory upgrade used to withstand heat. I think it's probably better when it's required and used for temperature, but since this game has new suits anyway and we're bringing back optional upgrades, I thought it would be fun to have the Virus Suit work the way it did in the 8-bit era. Just for this one game. The Corrosion Suit. Now this is a new suit upgrade that is required. It lets you walk through the acid rain on planet Urtraghus, but unlike the shield upgrade in Prime 3, the Corrosion Suit is an actual full suit. Here's the baseline for its design. It's not a great edit, but I think it's cool. Phase Missile, that's a new upgrade I came up with. It's pretty simple. It allows your missiles to phase through things while still doing damage. Now for some of the bosses here. The Pirate Urtraghus is an X-Parasite pirate in a mech suit, except it used its X-Parasite powers to sort of organically bond with the mech. Beating it nets you the Super Missile. The next boss is Gandreda X. I figured it wouldn't make much sense for us to revisit the pirate homeworld without bringing back at least one of its bosses from Prime 3, but the only real bosses here are Gandreda and Omega Ridley. Trust me, we'll get to Ridley later. But for now, we'll just say that Gandreda left a little bit of her blood splattered on the wall during the fight with Samus in Prime 3, and then X-Parasite harvested that dried blood after Urtraghus got infected with X, so now Samus has to fight Gandreda X. X-Parasites are shapeshifters, and Gandreda's a shapeshifter, so I think they could combine their powers to make some pretty rad amalgamations during the battle. It'd be a pretty cool fight if it was in a real game. Anyways, beating her nets you the Wave Beam, which is this game's only classic beam upgrade. It works Prime style instead of 2D style though, meaning it's electricity based instead of going through walls. After getting the Wave Beam, you get access to a Super Tram. This Super Tram is very fast, and for good reason. It takes you all the way to the Arctic of Urtraghus. The reason they have a tram that leads to this planet's North Pole is because this is where the newly built Chozo Robotics Lab is. They built the Chozo Robotics Lab here because it's the only part of the planet to not have acid rain. Instead, it tends to snow up here. We'll have to trudge through the snow and infiltrate the Chozo Robotics Lab. There, you'll find infected space pirates with much more advanced weaponry, and some Chozo robot soldiers with a few enhancements that the ones you fought earlier didn't have. While walking through the base, there will be one room with a giant robot in the background. This won't be any robot though. It seems to be a Ridley robot. Now, before you say anything, note this. I'm not just bringing Ridley back because of fan service and because I like Ridley. If that were the case, I'd just give him a fight exclusive to a boss rush. No, I'm bringing him back because I feel like most Metroid games in the past have portrayed him poorly, and I want a version of Ridley that actually lives up to his potential as a villain. Most of the time, he only gets a few appearances per game at best, and is often just dumbed down to being a boss monster used for fan service at worst. He should be more than that. This guy is the leader of the space pirates. He killed Samus's parents for crying out loud. He shouldn't just be a boss used for fan service, he should be a villain. So, I'm bringing Ridley back, but only under this criteria. Criteria number 1. He feels like a real threat. Most of the time, Samus just floors Ridley and calls it a day. This time, that can't be the case. Ridley should feel like a true force of nature, and a very dangerous force of nature too. You know how you used to shit your pants when the SAX showed up on screen in Fusion? Ridley in this game should have a similar effect, only with double the shit. Criteria number 2. His vengeful relationship with Samus needs to be explored more. We all know that Samus hates Ridley. Since Ridley killed Samus's parents, he killed Samus's adopted parents, and he kidnapped her adopted child to be later killed by Mother Brain. With how many times Samus has beaten Ridley within an inch of his life, or sometimes straight up killed him, I think it's safe to say that Ridley hates Samus too. So, whenever we see Samus encounter Ridley, they should both be giving each other looks that say, "I want your insides on your outsides." Maybe even have Ridley give us some dialogue that portrays such. Ravenbeak opened the door for speaking villains in Metroid, and Ridley's meant to be intelligent. So what better way to make him an actual villain than to give him stuff to say? Criteria number 3. He needs to have some presence in the game. Very often we only see Ridley twice in the games he appears in. His introduction and his boss fight. Sometimes a brief third instance in between to remind us he exists. That can't happen here. He needs to have frequent appearances, and to have at least some involvement in the overarching story. Criteria number 4. I know I said he shouldn't just be a boss fight, but when his boss fight does inevitably happen, it needs to be a fucking banger. Samus Returns' Ridley fight was my favorite boss fight in the entire Metroid series, and I think this next Ridley fight needs to top that. There's been a lot of great Ridley fights, and a lot of meh ones. His fight here needs to be one of the greats. Now, I hope I've convinced you not to ridicule me in the comments for including Ridley here. Anyways, as I was saying, there's a Ridley robot in the background, which is currently offline. For now. A scannable log in the room will say how Goldenclaw has learned from both the stories about Samus from the Space Pirates and his own experiences on DDR that Samus may be the only one to stand up to his conquest when he's ready. Because of this, he's built a robot form for Samus' greatest enemy, and he's given the robot some Chozo technology to hopefully give the being controlling the robot the edge he's needed all this time to overcome Samus. Moving forward, you find a room that says Neural Data Storage. In this room seems to be a lot of physical copies of files with labels written on the wall above them. These labels name different space pirate leaders, like Kraid, Phantoon, Weevil, a few members of Hive Command that we haven't seen yet, and Ridley. You can infer that this room contains all the uploaded backup minds of space pirate leaders. One file, in the middle, is labeled in Chozo language. Scanning it reads, Ravenbeak. Dun dun dun! I will touch on that near the end. Moving forward, you'll drop down into a darker area deep in the facility, where you'll find the next boss, the Torrential Echo. It's a robot spider that does both spider attacks and robot attacks. Beating it gives you the Storm Missile. After you beat it, however, a cutscene plays, showing a Galactic Federation ship pulling up above the planet Urtraghus. Looks like the cat's out of the bag about the X-Parasites here. Adam contacts Samus and tells her about the Federation ship. He says that a smaller Federation ship must have also received the distress signal from earlier and detected the X-parasites on the planet's surface after a scan, and then told their superiors about them, causing the Federation to now get involved. Adam tells Samus that the Federation cannot be trusted when it comes to this sort of thing, and that she needs to make her way out of the Arctic to find Golden Claw and finish this before things get heated with the Federation and the Machina. Returning back up into the main part of the Arctic base, an easy detail to miss is that in the neural data storage room, Ridley's file is now missing. Returning to the room with the Ridley robot, however, there will be something far harder to miss. Not only is the Ridley robot gone, but the entire room seems to be trashed, and there's a massive hole in the ceiling that the Ridley robot likely burst through to escape the room. The hole in the ceiling caused some rubble to fall down over the door that leads to the rest of the facility, so you have to climb out the hole in the ceiling. Once Samus climbs onto the roof, a cutscene will trigger. She'll look down into the room that she just climbed out of, and then up into the sky, where a strange figure can be seen in the distance. The camera pans over to show that this figure is, in fact, Mecha Ridley. Samus sees this, and we see her expression through the visor as a mix between anger and surprise. Ridley's mechanical irises, however, show pure anger. Mecha Ridley then lets loose a massive stream of fire out of his billet, headed directly towards Samus. Samus dodges, and has to start running with Ridley's flame stream right behind her. It's basically the Diggernaut sequence in Samus Returns, but with the stream of Ridley's plasma instead of the Diggernaut's drills. Eventually, Samus will escape and get back down into the facility from the roof. And from there, Samus will have to make it back up to the roof and back down again multiple times in order to make it out of the base. And every time she exits the facility, Mecha Ridley will show up and try to kill Samus one way or another. Keep in mind, none of these attempts by Ridley to kill Samus are actual full-on boss fights yet. That comes later. Once Samus leaves the facility for good and is heading back towards the tram, Mecha Ridley makes an appearance one last time. He drops down from the sky and launches himself into Samus.
Long have I waited for this moment, Samus.
He flies by the ground and grinds her against the snow for a bit until realizing that that maneuver won't work here because of the snow, so he opts to eat Samus into the ground instead. Samus ends up buried beneath a snowbank with only a little HP left.
Finally.
Ridley leaves, believing that he's finally killed her. You limp back to the tram with a sliver of HP left and head back to Pirate Research, leaving the Arctic base behind for a while. Here's a list of upgrades you'll obtain while in the Arctic base. During the return trip, another cutscene with the Galactic Federation ship above Urtraghus plays. We see as a dropship exits the ship and lands down on Urtraghus. The ship's doors open up, and the camera pans down to show a single mechanical foot exiting the dropship. Cut back to Samus, who's now made her way back to Pirate Research. Now that you're back to the main part of Urtraghus, your newly acquired upgrade should allow you access to one final tram. This tram doesn't take you as far as the Arctic, however. It goes to somewhere far closer. The ruins of the destroyed Leviathan Seed. Upon entry to the Leviathan Seed's ruins, you'll find a throne occupied by a Machina warrior clad in golden armor. By this throne, there are a lot of infected space pirates serving this Machina soldier. It appears that you found Golden Claw. The pirates make their exit, and Samus stands there looking up at Golden Claw. Golden Claw begins an evil monologue, which basically boils down to,
Pirates told me about how you foiled their plans. You foiled the Machina's plans twice, and you fucking killed Master Ravenbeak. I built all this in his name, and now you've threatened to destroy it as well? I will fucking murder you.
Cue boss fight number 4, Golden Claw. Golden Claw's fight resembles the fights with the Machina ex-soldiers in Dread, except far more cinematic, and in a much larger area. He also has a few new attacks. For example, his spear has been modified to be able to open up at the top and shoot lasers. And sometimes, he'll purposely turn into Core X form and try and ram you with the Core X shield before turning back into Golden Claw. Once you deal enough damage to Golden Claw that it looks like he's lost, he'll get angry. He starts mutating himself into a larger amalgamation in order to defeat Samus, like how the SAX did in Fusion. But, before he can attack her, Golden Claw is reverted into X-Parasite form and sucked inside of the Emmy robot. That joke I made earlier about the Federation getting greedy and sending down an Emmy to get an X-Parasite sample? Yeah, that wasn't just a joke, that was also foreshadowing, because of course the Federation would want an X-Parasite sample, and of course they'd go for the big bad X-Parasite, and not one of Golden Claw's Blackie. After obtaining Golden Claw's X-Parasite, the Emmy rushes back to the dropship to get the X-Sample back to the Federation, and Samus is hot on the Emmy's tail. Unfortunately, this Emmy has a speed upgrade, so it's able to get back to the dropship and take off before Samus can reach it. However, Samus is not a quitter, so she fires the grapple beam, which attaches to the side of the dropship, and she hangs onto it as the dropship leaves the atmosphere and goes back up to the large Federation ship. Once the dropship docks in the Federation ship, Samus decides to dip before she's spotted, so she jumps into the nearby ventilation system. Since she's just exited the atmosphere of a volatile planet at a very high velocity with nothing but her power suit for protection, the power suit is damaged as fuck. Her Zero Suit is even exposed in some parts. Samus ends up recalling the suit in order for it to spend some time self-repairing, leaving Samus in her Zero Suit for the time being. Adam contacts Samus while she's on the ship, though it's a bit choppy. He says that the Federation ship is moving away, and that it won't be long until Adam won't be able to contact or track Samus anymore due to the distance. If she can find a repair station on the ship, she should be able to get the suit back up and running again. And then after that, she'll need to stop the Federation ship from reaching HQ, and retrieve the X-Parasite sample from the Emmy robot. Then he cuts out. I feel like it's weird how Zero Suit Samus is literally in Smash Bros, but there's only been one Zero Suit section in the whole series. Other Rem Escape sequence does not count. Also, I absolutely love the Zero Suit section in Zero Mission, so we're doing another one. Samus is now trapped aboard the GFS Epsilon without her suit, and she'll now have to sneak around and either avoid the Federation Marines or escape from the Federation Marines to get to the repair station and get her suit back. Once Samus hits the repair station, the Marines are right on her tail. She manages to fix and redon the suit right as they round a corner and one of them takes a shot at her, which the power suit manages to mostly deflect. Insert cutscene where Samus fucking steamrolls through the Federation Marines. While steamrolling, one of Samus' shots hits the GFS Epsilon's fuel tank, causing it to start leaking. The Federation guys on the bridge debate about what to do about this, and eventually they find a nearby abandoned authority-type mining colony where they can refuel. The GFS Epsilon makes landfall on planet K2L. Dun dun dun! Samus' old home planet from the manga. Once they've landed, most of the crew gets the fuck out of the ship to stay away from Samus, and they bring the Emmy robot that's still holding the X-Parasite sample with them. You're allowed to explore the Epsilon a bit, find some expansions and some scan logs, but soon you'll be making your way out and gazing upon the surface of K2L. Since Samus left her ship back on Urtraghus and Adam can't track Samus this far away, you can't leave the planet on your ship, and you can't contact Adam at all. At this point in the game, Samus is completely alone. Isolation used to be a big part of Metroid, and it still kind of is. I feel like the isolation would hit harder in this game, though, if you spent the first part of the game with Adam, to make you feel all the more alone when you're stuck without Adam and you're completely on your own during this section. Also, of course, if you read the manga, you'll know that K2L was the planet that Samus was born on. It's a planet where her parents were killed. It won't matter much to the average newcomer, but anybody who is familiar with Samus' backstory will notice that Samus is acting a bit different while in K2L. You know, there's just like a bit of a different look in her eyes. And, you know, even an average newcomer will find out that this is where Samus is from soon enough. While exploring K2L's first area, the colony grounds, you'll find that the Federation has gotten their hands on some Chozo technology, and that they may have left some of it behind while they were setting out to grab fuel. Samus will finally find the flash shift out here, and she'll be able to use it to get into the second area on K2L, the Effloral-type mines. The Effloral-type mines are split into two sections. The upper industrial part, which has a lot of factory and processing machinery, and the lower mining part, which is where all the actual Effloral-type is. The lower area is a lot harder and more dangerous, and the only man-made stuff down there is broken down mining equipment. It's in the lower area of the mines where you fight the first boss on K2L, the Effloral Leech. It's one of K2L's normal indigenous creatures, except this one ate like a shit ton of Effloral-type, and now you have to fight a weird fuel monster. Beating it gets you the Fuel Beam, which is this game's third beam upgrade. It's a beam that shoots Effloral-type, functioning kind of like the Magmall from Metroid Prime Hunters. After beating the Effloral Leech, you'll go up to a newer part of the industrial section of the mines, where you'll find a small makeshift camp the Marines built. There you'll find some Federation Marines, and the second boss on K2L, a bounty hunter. It's weird how Samus is the only bounty hunter we've really seen in 2D Metroid, so here we'll be fighting another bounty hunter that the Federation hired to deal with Samus so they can get off this stupid planet without it. Why can't they call a bounty hunter over, but they can't call another ship over to pick them up and bring them back to Federation HQ? I don't know. I'm not a perfect writer. I mean, Metroid's had plot holes before. It's fine. It's fine. I'm so sorry. If anybody has a good explanation, please put it in the comments. After defeating the hunter, you gain access to a new room. This room has a control console hooked up to a communications dish on the roof of the cave you're in. You're able to use this communications dish to get in contact with Adam. Adam will comment on the data that you sent him, telling you that you did good work, but then he'll tell you that things have been happening on Urtraghus since you left. The infected space pirates have located Golden Claw's X-Parasite, and they're preparing to mount a rescue attempt. They dug up one of the old wormhole generators from the Phazon Crisis days, and they've convinced Ridley to get it working again for them, and to point it towards K2L. Samus will need to return to Urtraghus and try and prevent this rescue attempt. Adam has now received Samus' coordinates from the communications dish, so he's now bringing the ship over to K2L. List of upgrades you get during first visit to K2L. A few more things to touch on for K2L before we head back to Urtraghus. There's a few scan logs around the colony grounds that detail some of the business that happened around K2L before the space pirates tore the place to shreds. Many of these logs are written by Rodney Aaron, Samus' father, and some of the logs mention Samus as a very young child. Once you're finished with this area, however, there's one more thing you can optionally take a look at right at the end that can only be unlocked with the screw attack. Old security footage of Ridley murdering Samus' mom. Really praying that we can maintain the T rating with this one, but it may be difficult. I had to include some Samus backstory, parent kill stuff, if we're going to be on K2L for this game. So, Adam pilots Samus' ship to the colony grounds, and you're able to head back inside it and fly back to Urtraghus. Here, you find yourself unlocking a new set of rooms where the pirates seem to have readied their wormhole generator. You enter this room via a morph ball tunnel below the floor, and you can see a horde of space pirates and a very menacing Mecha Ridley passing through the wormhole before you exit the tunnel. After passing through the wormhole yourself, you find yourself back on K2L already. This is a part of K2L you haven't been to yet. It's not a place you recognize. It appears to be some kind of desert, with a lot of makeshift fortifications and bases built by the Galactic Federation crew aboard the GFS Epsilon. Additionally, there also happens to be a big battle going on here, with the X-infected space pirates fighting the Federation Marines. The battle here is clearly one-sided, since every time a Marine shoots a pirate, it turns into an X-Parasite and infects the Marine, who then turns on their allies. Additionally, the space pirates also have Mecha Ridley on their side, who keeps taking down entire hordes of Marines and tearing apart fortifications. Wherever on K2L this is, the pirates sensed they had to come here, meaning this is where the Federation is keeping the X-Parasite sample. And since the battle here seems pretty one-sided, that means you'll have to track down Golden Claw's X-Parasites before the pirates can rescue him, or else. Making your way through the facilities and trying to avoid both Marines and pirates, you eventually stumble across a larger facility. Here, you find a scientist, the Emmy robot, and a containment jar holding Golden Claw's X-Parasite. Upon seeing you, the scientist panics and punches a few commands into the control console for the Emmy robot, ordering it to go after you. The Emmy goes after you and immediately gets parried because, of course, Samus Aran. And Samus activates Hyper Mode to try and drain it like she did the Red Emmy in Tenubia. However, this Emmy seems to have some kind of energy shield, which Samus' left hand can't drain through. Since she can't drain the Emmy, Samus opts for a more risky maneuver. She reroutes all the Metroid energy directly into her arm cannon, which makes her lose the Metroid suit and the energy drain ability, but lets her keep the Hyper Beam for a much longer amount of time. Right as she's finished rerouting the power to the Hyper Beam, the Emmy recovers from the melee counter and starts going after Samus. Next boss, Emmy Robot. In the last game you had to evade and then eventually destroy 5 of these, plus a 6 for a tutorial and a 7 for a cutscene. In this game, it's just the destruction part, and for only 1. Also, comparing this fight to the Emmy fights in Dread, the Omega Stream and Omega Blaster are replaced with the Hyper Beam now. Once you defeat the Emmy robot, it gives you the last upgrade in this game, the Epsilon suit. This suit is made out of the same stuff that the Emmy robot's armor is made out of. It vastly increases your defense, and makes you immune to damage from a floral type. Also, your Hyper Beam runs out of power after you kill the enemy. Now that she's decked the enemy and gotten her new suit, Samus rushes back to try and nab Golden Claw's X-Parasite, but it's too late. The space pirates have made it here, and they've broken open the container, freeing Golden Claw. Golden Claw sees Samus, jumps up to the top of the room, and causes a bunch of structural damage to the building before dipping. A good amount of the building collapses in, causing the exit to be blocked off. Looking through a small opening, Samus sees Golden Claw taking off in a ship the pirates brought to K2L for him, and leaving the planet. Samus will have to find another exit through the bottom, which will lead back to the floral type mines and eventually back to the colony grounds, where she can reach her ship again. Back on the ship, Adam notes that Golden Claw can't have been going back to Urtraghus, since he left in a ship instead of just going back through the wormhole, which was still open. Adam mentions that he did some deep-level hacking into the pirate database while in Urtraghus, and that he found information about a secondary base Golden Claw was building, located on a former moon of planet SR388. After the planet went up, the moon started free-floating through space on its own, and now Golden Claw has started to build a base there. So, Samus sets course for this game's third and final celestial body, SR388 NS3. NS stands for Natural Satellite, SR388 NS3, SR388 Natural Satellite 3. SR388 had 3 moons, and this is the third one. Upon arrival, you'll notice 2 important details about the moon. The first important detail is that this moon seems to be absolutely glowing with Aeon energy. The entire moon is covered in a yellow haze. The second thing you'll notice is that there's a large floating structure about a mile away from your landing site, and it seems to be siphoning the Aeon energy out of the moon. Making your way towards the floating structure, you'll run into a lot of elite space pirates to deal with, but they're pretty easy to defeat, courtesy of the Epsilon suit. About halfway towards the structure, you'll find another wormhole generator, like the one linking K2L and Urtraghus. What could another one be doing here? Entering through the wormhole, it shoots you back out into Urtraghus again. More specifically, you end up in the Arctic base, somewhat close by to the Neural Data Storage Room. Upon entering the Neural Data Storage Room, you'll find Golden Claw, who's removing one of the files from their containment units. This file is the largest file in the room, and its label is the one written in Chozo language. This isn't the file for just any pirate leader's digitized mind. It's a file for Ravenbeak's digitized mind. That's what Golden Claw was downloading in his ship during the opening cutscene. After Golden Claw removes the file, he turns around and addresses Samus. He speaks about the
great empire of Spartans that he intends to build under Ravenbeak, and that Samus could have had a place in that empire had she cooperated back on ZDR. Alas though, since she didn't, her spot has gone to someone else.
And that someone else crashes through the wall behind her.
Samus, welcome back. Shame you won't be staying long.
With Samus now distracted with Mecha Ridley, Golden Claw uses this opportunity to get away. Samus would love to stop Golden Claw, but she's got a vendetta to settle. Boss fight, Mecha Ridley. This Mecha Ridley fight is nothing like the one in Zero Mission, courtesy of the fact that this version can both walk and fly. The arena starts pretty small, but Mecha Ridley starts tearing up the walls and ceiling before long, causing the arena to expand. This fight as a whole is somewhat a mix between the Proteus Ridley fight in Samus Returns and a 2D version of the Meta Ridley fight in Prime. It will be a difficult fight. 2 phases later, Mecha Ridley will fall to the ground, appearing to have short-circuited. Now that Ridley has been defeated, Samus will use this as an opportunity to scan his robot brain to try and gain some information. You see, Golden Claw's had that file for the digitized copy of Ravenbeak's brain since he made landfall on Urtraghus. If he just wanted to plug Ravenbeak's mind into a robot, he would have done it ages ago. Well before he would even consider plugging Ridley or any of the other pirate leaders into robots as well. This means that Golden Claw must have a different plan for Ravenbeak's file, and with any luck, Mecha Ridley will have known that plan. This thought process will be conveyed via Adam, or Samus' internal monologue, or some other means, I don't know. Upon scanning Ridley's hard drive, Samus' suspicions are correct. She finds that Golden Claw has constructed an artificial brain, and he intends to plug Ravenbeak into that instead. The reason for this is because Golden Claw has plans for genetic modification, which can only be done if Ravenbeak is in an organic body. Golden Claw intends to inject the brain with X-Parasite DNA, which will offer up the X-Parasite's very powerful abilities of assimilating other life forms and being able to mutate on command, all without the drawbacks of just being infected by an X-Parasite. However, while Golden Claw's tests have concluded that an infusion like this can work, it would only work if the subject were to absorb vast quantities of Aeon energy at the same time as they were infused with the X DNA. This is a reason for building that floating base on SR388 NS3. With the destruction of planet SR388, its moon NS3 is the only natural source of Aeon energy left in the galaxy, aside from Samus herself, who we've seen generate inside of her body, almost certainly thanks to the Metroid DNA. However, Ravenbeak already tried taking Samus' Metroid DNA in Dread in order to raise a Metroid army, and it went horribly wrong, so siphoning the Aeon out of NS3 seems like the smarter option for Goldenclaw. After scanning Ridley's databanks and getting all of his information, Adam tells Samus just how bad it would be if this infusion were to succeed. Ravenbeak would no longer need Samus' Metroid DNA, or even Goldenclaw's pirate armor. He could just consume everything and then spit it back out in his image. Okay, that's an exaggeration, but it would be pretty damn bad. While Adam is telling Samus this, something gets up behind Samus. Mecha Ridley is back online. Samus doesn't hear him over Adam talking, but notices something is off at the last second and turns around just in time to meet a mechanical tail strike from behind. She fires a few missiles at Mecha Ridley, who promptly jets up through the roof and flies the heck out of there. Ridley knew this wasn't a fight he could win with all the damage he's already sustained, so instead he opted to get the heck out of there so he could live to remove Samus' spine from her body another day. Samus readies herself to space jump after Ridley, but Adam stops her, telling her that there's no time and that she needs to stop Goldenclaw before he can bring back Ravenbeak. Ridley will return in Metroid 7. Anyways, after that fight, you head back to the wormhole that brought you here, and return to SR388 NS3. Although upon return, you'll notice something is different. The yellow glow of the Aeon energy seems significantly lower here than when you first arrived. The floating structure in the distance also seems to be siphoning even more Aeon than it was before. You'll have to hurry, you're running out of time. After running across NS3 some more and cutting through space pirates like butter, you'll eventually find yourself beneath the floating structure that's absorbing Aeon from the moon. With some quick thinking, Samus is able to catch a ride on one of the beams of Aeon in order to make it up to the floating structure. Enter the final area, New Idarash. After walking through a few areas on this floating fortress, you'll find Goldenclaw punching in commands on a control console right next to a test room where you'll see the artificial brain. We see Goldenclaw has already uploaded Ravenbeak to the brain, and he presses the button to enter the Aeon energy into the brain right as Samus intervenes and starts beating the crap out of him. Time for a rematch with Goldenclaw. This fight is quite easier, shorter, and in a more confined space than its fight in the ruined Leviathan Seed, which can be in-universe explained by Samus' new upgrades, but in terms of this game's design, it's because this fight is only the appetizer. After dealing enough damage, we see Samus trying to rush towards the brain in order to destroy it. Goldenclaw starts holding her back, but Samus beats him back. Goldenclaw lands towards the control console, and he uses this as an opportunity to enter the final command in to inject the X-Parasite DNA into the brain. Samus tries to stop the infusion, but it's too late. Tendrils made out of black goop start coming out of the brain, and one shoots out and grabs Goldenclaw. Goldenclaw can do nothing but scream in surprise as he's dragged into the brain and is assimilated. Now that the brain's assimilated Goldenclaw, it can now take Chozo form. It forms itself into a Mockin soldier that looks somewhat like Goldenclaw, but the golden armor is now gray and he's much bigger. Additionally, his helmet is now off, meaning we can now see the Mockin face of the enemy we face. That may be Goldenclaw's DNA he's using to form that body, but the man we're facing isn't Goldenclaw. It's Ravenbeak. Ravenbeak looks at Samus. He doesn't remember anything after he uploaded his brain, which includes the battle between him and Samus, but due to the current situation he's in, he's able to deduce that his plan failed. But he's not upset about it, since if his plan didn't fail, then Goldenclaw would have never gifted him with these great new abilities with which he can conquer. The DNA of an X-Parasite. What a genius idea Goldenclaw had with that. Shame what Ravenbeak had to do to him, but he needed his Mockin body back. Now the only thing standing between Ravenbeak and conquest is Samus. Final boss, Phase 1. Ravenbeak EX. This fight utilizes a lot of the hand-to-hand elements that the Ravenbeak fight in Dread had, but this Ravenbeak lacks all the Chozo tech he had in that fight. So instead, he makes heavy utilization of his X-Parasite powers. He'll make temporary mutations of himself that will allow him to make some deadly moves at Samus, and he'll attack Samus with the X-Parasite black goop we saw in Dread. At some points, he'll even mutate his arm into the shape of an arm cannon, and shoot black goop out of that right at Samus's face. Eventually, you'll deal enough damage, and Phase 2. Ravenbeak grabs the devices that sent the Aeon energy into his brain form, and absorbs all the extra excess Aeon energy that was stored up in New Urtraghus, but wasn't given to him before the infusion. This turns him into an abomination of mutation, some sort of bird monster made out of black goop that keeps changing shape. He's still very sentient though, and still hell-bent on murdering Samus and conquering the galaxy. Once you deal enough damage, the cutscene triggers. Samus activates Hyper Mode and tries to use her left hand to drain Ravenbeak, but with his monstrous form, Ravenbeak has somehow found a way to block the drain. His amalgamation of a bird head looks down at Samus as she keeps trying and failing to absorb him. He starts gloating towards Samus while she keeps trying her best, eventually bringing up something that reminds Samus of a baby Metroid. This reminder gives Samus an idea. In Super Metroid, the baby saved her by taking the power of her mother brain and giving it to Samus. If the baby can release energy as well as take it, then that means that Samus can too. Suddenly, we see the energy flow in Samus' left hand change directions, and it turns from the color pink to the color blue. Samus is no longer trying to absorb Ravenbeak's energy, she is now releasing energy directly into him. With all the energy Ravenbeak's already absorbed, he starts overloading. He starts mutating new appendages that he didn't mutate on purpose, which then decay and fall off of him only a few seconds after their creation. Samus keeps going, and before long, the appendages Ravenbeak had already grown also start to wither and fall off. Samus finds the head of the Ravenbeak amalgamation, grabs his throat, and starts releasing energy directly into it. She looks Ravenbeak directly in the eyes as she chokes him with energy, and says,
Hadar. Senon.
She then picks up what's left of the Ravenbeak abomination by her left hand, and throws him directly into New Urtraghus' Aeon reactor with all her might. It's time for the ending escape sequence, and hopefully this time Samus will succeed in escaping. With the destruction of the reactor pulling in energy, New Urtraghus is no longer linked to SR-388 and S3, and is now free-floating, meaning Samus will have to find another way out than just going back down onto the moon. Also, not only is Samus no longer in Hyper Mode, but her Hyper Mode gauge is gone. It seems she released so much energy into Ravenbeak that she can't use her Metroid powers at all anymore. Regardless, Samus needs to get the fuck out of there. After running through 2 minutes worth of glowing fiery hallways and some X-infected space pirates, you'll find a very large hall that leads directly out into space. A cutscene triggers where Samus runs through with her speed booster and then shines sparks away from New Urtraghus as it explodes, and into deep space. Soon, Adam flies Samus' gunship by, and Samus manages to break the shine spark and land on her gunship. She enters the ship and flies away into space. Mission complete. So that was my pitch for Powers Metroid, aka Metroid 6, aka Metroid Dread 2. I hope you all liked it, although I can definitely see a lot of you guys writing in the comments section now about how the direction I think the series should go in is shitty, both story-wise and gameplay-wise. But you know what? That's fine. This is just the ideas of a dumb guy who talks about games on the internet, and it's most likely that if we eventually do get Metroid 6, it will be pretty different from what I suggested here, and probably also very different from the ideas that any of you guys have. Frankly, I'm very excited to see what Sakamoto plans to do with the series next, because Dread was great, and I don't doubt that a sequel will be even better. Although, I hope they don't push the game's difficulty, because I got stuck on pretty much every single boss in Dread my first time through, including the mini-bosses. And that wasn't a pleasant experience. Oh, also, you're probably wondering what happened to the X-Parasites on the 3 different planets, since none of those planets exploded. I should probably explain that, shouldn't I? NS3 isn't actually a habitable moon, and it was only survivable for the X-Parasites because of the pure Aeon energy atmosphere. After New Urtraghus absorbed all the Aeon energy, the moon was left with no atmosphere, and all the X-Parasites died. On K2L, the X-Parasite pirate army was under the control of Golden Claw, and therefore they didn't really care about taking over all the non-sentient lifeforms on K2L. After they invaded the Federation's makeshift base and rescued their master, all the X-Parasites just went back to Urtraghus and left K2L alone. K2L's fine, there's no X-Parasites on there anymore. Now, that still leaves Urtraghus in the mix, with all its X-Parasites still roaming around the planet alive and well. So, post-credit scene. Thank you all for watching, please subscribe, and thanks again for making it to the end.